Good morning.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Morning.
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 Morning, morning, Tom.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone. How are you all?
Very well. Good.
Welcome.
Anything else, Beth?
Morning, Colin.
Oh, I need to get my score.
Haydn.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi.
Yeah.
Good morning. Hello.
Morning.
Hi, Rosie. Hi, Catherine.
Hi,
Nice
Liz.
to see you.
Hiya.
Morning, Trish.
Morning, Albert. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Trisha.
Chris.
Look, Imogen, it's standby with the instrument.
Yeah, and so is George.
Very cool.
Oh, fantastic. You're ready to go.
Morning.
Good morning. Hi, Claire.
Good morning.
Hi, Jean. Good morning. Hi, Adam. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, great.
Fantastic.
That's better.
Right.
Morning,
Deborah.
Liz.
Morning. Morning. Not so nice this morning.
Oh, great.
It's very nice here.
Misty,
It's lovely
3
here.
degrees.
Is it?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's further north, I think.
Lincoln.
Liverpool's good. Morning.
Yeah, it's glorious where I am today. So it's nice. Very cold, but
3
it's
degrees.
nice.
Morning, George. Practicing
It's
already.
grey and looks as if it's going to rain here.
Ooh.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's pretty much everybody here who is attending today, isn't it? Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good
Morning.
morning.
Yeah. Shall we just mute? I will just mute everybody apart from quoted. Let's see. Mute everybody. Mute all. Okay.
Yes. Good morning. There we go. Last we have Bernard. Good morning, Bernard. It all works. Fantastic.
Woohoo.
All right. So good morning and great to see you all. And we will start with first two movements mainly. But before we go into each movement, I thought I'm sure many of you know already, but just brief background of Opus 20 and what Opus 20 is for Haydn, and then in the history of string quartet, and then for the what it impacted for the later, especially for Mozart. Anyway, so I thought about, well, first of all, there is a sense in us going back to, well, yes, I naturally say going back to Haydn, or like start from the beginning. There is that sense like it's something nice to come back to Haydn. But when I was kind of reflecting about it yesterday, I realized at that time when Haydn composed Opus 20, it was a revelation, and it was an innovative place he was in. He was very influenced by what was going on in Europe, and especially philosophical thinking and politics. So Silla was there, Rousseau was there, Goethe was there. So he was in that place. So it was an innovative process that he produced this Opus 20. I thought that's really remarkable things for us to be reminded, because Haydn is a father of string quartet, and then who set the classical form and then sonata form. And then I think sometimes we ourselves kind of rigid our sense of how much freedom we allow in our inspiration in those era of music. So I thought that's really, really important things for me to be reminded. And then before Opus 20, Haydn's string quartet was more violin oriented, let's say, like mainline oriented, and certainly the structure wasn't there. Carmen, can you play just a little bit of Opus 1?
Yes, I'll do that right now. Screen. Can you see that, everybody?
Yep. So I've never played Opus 1. I think I have looked at it, but I've never performed it or studied it. So I don't know too well, but briefly looked at, and it's a 5 movements, and it's kind of the collection of dance movements, or like a collection of movements, so that it's certainly didn't have the what's normal for us, the 4 movement style. It was the kind of, it looks like, and it feels like a suite. So it's almost like a kind of extension of how Baroque music was. So that's just good to know. And then so equal voices, the elements of the equal voices, and then conversational nature in the string quartet. Those things just started happening from this Opus 20. And this Opus 20 really inspired Mozart. So Mozart's early string quartet work was like directly inspired by Haydn's Opus 20. And then later, when Haydn composed Opus 33, that directly inspired Mozart. So Mozart produced what's called Haydn set. So it's really good to be reminded that kind of innovative era, that's this great collection of string quartet were born at the time. So that's kind of my brief introduction for Opus 20. So shall we dive into the music? Okay. Yes. Should I share the music so like quartet can start kind of talking about it?
Well, does everyone have a score? That'd be good if everyone. Oh, we've got it there. Great. Oh no, with my notes on it.
Sorry, we wanted to use this one.
That's
My
great.
random notes. Okay.
It's really good. Thought process is good. So the first thing to think about, of course, is our unison first two bars, and how extraordinary I feel the third bar feels once you've played those first two bars. I don't know about you guys in the quartet, but something about playing those first two bars and you're there on a D pedal, and the rhythm of it, and then the feeling of the harmony of the third bar. I always feel it has a special color to me. Coming from, and I don't know, I don't think any of the other earlier Haydn quartets have anything like this as an opening. And I always find it a bit surprising. You know, we all often have this conversation: shall we start up bow? Shall we start down bow? How much bow should we use on that first bar? And I think that's the challenge. It's surprising and different. And how you approach it. Is it an upbeat bar, and then a sort of 5-bar phrase, or are we thinking 6 bars and it's sort of one? I mean, we talked about it a little bit in the sectionals this week, I think. But how we feel that these first bars, I think, is really interesting.
That's certainly. And then that when we just look at this beginning section, what strikes me is just kind of sense of oneness. Like using the quartet as kind of one voice is, as Katie said, we start from unison and then depart, and then unison and then depart, and then somehow we just it's like just one thing's going blossom throughout this section, right? And from that sense, and then later when it goes to this, and when first violin comes, it goes like that, and then we answer bum 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 bum. We answer in kind of one things again, and then brr. So that kind of juxtaposition of that sense of oneness, and then this brilliant triplet-oriented things. So that seems like the kind of theme for the exposition to me.
You could also think a little bit about the blend of the sound, because if you were looking at the four voices, obviously he made, instead of spreading us apart, I always think it's interesting in quartet to think about what kind of sound you want to make, and it really depends based on your register and how it's blended together. Now, obviously, first and second violins are the same, and that's where you feel that thing in the third bar, the G against the C sharp, is such a beautiful interval, but the viola is really low. So we're all quite low down. There's an octave between the viola and cello. Are we octaves or 2 octaves between? I think it's just an octave between the two.
Just an octave, yeah.
Octave between you two and an octave above. So there's a 2 octave spread, which is not that much in a quartet. So, I mean, I tend to think in these situations, having a bit more viola. I mean, I think this opening, I feel like, obviously, you don't want to be too quiet with the cello because it creates the pedal. I mean, look, it's amazing to think of playing one note for nearly 2 lines, but you want to have a strong cello sound. But if you just base on the cello, then actually the top feels a little thin. So somehow bringing the viola color out a little bit. Actually, I challenge everyone to listen to this opening without the viola, minus viola in our tracks, because I tell you, it really misses something without the viola color. When I was listening to them, I listened a little bit, and it sounds wrong. But yeah, so you need to have this viola sound, I think, to really balance properly.
It's something like the filler of the sandwich, maybe. You know, you have the support bread and then the violin octave on top, but then you need something inside also to complement.
What kind of sound are you kind of imagining in this opening section? Just image of the sound, quartet sound.
That's a very good question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking it's very interesting how if you just look at the first 4 bars or first 6 bars, it seems to be framed by rhythm. So there's a bar of rhythm at the beginning and a bar of rhythm at the end, punctuating the cello and the viola. And then in the middle is harmony. So it's just basically immediately establishing his priorities of harmony and rhythm. And it's in a neat sort of little sandwich, and it's quite nice. But and the rhythm. So the rhythm is implied, right, in the second and third bars. In the first bar, it's set up, but then immediately he lets us know that actually harmony is slightly more important, perhaps, as it sort of is all the way up until like Stravinsky, really. But yeah, I don't know. I think I've actually only just noticed that now. It's sort of nicely framed. Each of these little bits at the beginning, framed by with harmony in the middle. The third bar is the dominant, but it's still with the tonic pedal at the bottom, so it creates a beautiful dissonance between the cello and second violin, D and C sharp, and it kind of has, so that kind of has us. And then in the fourth bar, it goes to the subdominant on the second beat. And there's a bit of a hint of subdominant at the end of the fifth bar as well on the last beat. And so chords 1, 4, and 5. So it's very, very fundamental harmony. But the way it's written is because it emerges from this unison D, it has this sort of sense of wonder, doesn't it? It feels like it's starting from a very fundamental place and then just sort of expanding from nothing almost.
Actually, I think starting from thinking about that, if we think of the color of our sound as actually we started talking about it actually a stronger color and then getting quieter, because actually there's a purity about the first two bars, I think. Especially I imagine in the cello when you draw out that D, you're not thinking light, you're thinking actually sort of also thinking of slurs, you're thinking that the beginning,
grounded,
very grounded. And I always think of when I get up to the G, I do that fourth into the third bar, I think of lifting the sound, actually a lighter, slightly more glowing feeling, sort of trying to move away from the ground, the ground feeling, so that you're really lifting. So in that way, actually, I don't think you want it to be either too fluffy or too ringing. There is a sort of an element of the rhythm with the grit, almost a bit gritty. And I think once we have that, then it gives that that feeling of moving away from it. I think there is much more interest in what you can do.
That's right. So like not fluffy, but not overly expressive. That kind of pure sound where story can begin, or like the music can begin. That grit, like some kind of grit, not the really gritty grit, but like pure resonance grit. Yeah.
It's like, as you said, the beginning of the story, this is kind of like the introduction or the prologue, introducing the material. So bringing it in, where is that sound coming from? You could almost have that effect on what is this, how are we beginning it?
The length of phrase is really interesting and slightly, almost uncomfortable one. It's a funny length, and then we talked about it. I think in the process of rehearsal, we talked about maybe bum bum bum. The first bar stands on its own, and then bum 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 da la 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 la. So like bum 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 1 2 3 1 2. Like we thought about that. Well, this we talked about that, and then at the time I thought, yeah, that's possible. I was thinking last night, it is almost possible to always unit the two bars as a kind of hypermeter. So bum 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 ba da 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 dum dun 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 da da da.
Feels weird. I think a three bar, like that feels very strange to me.
That's very strange.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, like, what happened if Haydn wrote that in 6/8? Bum 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 bum. Now it feels weird, but like there's that uncomfortable is a good word. Like it's a very natural harmony, very natural resonance, but like length of the phrase, or the kind of the way he made it, makes us a little bit like this, like what's next, and what's next. And so that's, I find that's the really interesting conversation until the burst of first violin. But
The two things that I think, so basically, if we played it, if it was a 4-bar phrase at the beginning.
yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Katie.
Sorry, I clicked it whilst I was talking. I think you would feel less wonder. I think there's something exploratory about the phrase lengths not being so square. By square, I mean, you know, expected. There's something, because he doesn't do the expected, the norm, it makes it more interesting. He loved doing that. And there've been a couple comments in the chat about how, you know, Haydn was a master at doing this with phrase lengths. One thing I do recommend for everyone, I love doing it, is you sit with your pencil and you put little comma on all of your phrases, just to explore, to see. And sometimes you realize you don't know. You can so you do a little comma open parentheses at the beginning of the phrase and a little closed one at the end, and go through and see in this first movement where it gets interesting. Because the phrase lengths, sometimes it's, you know, you think it's a 4 bars, but he repeats, so +2. I have scores that are just covered in all this, and it's very interesting when you're playing, because it helps you in the knowledge. You know, when we get to the C natural, the D da da D da 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 da, there's definitely a question of a moment of a bit of a 2 and then a 4, I feel, rather than just the 6 that we've been having. So I think he splits it up a little bit, and if you think of it that way, it really changes how you're thinking. Shall we move on to the triplets?
Are you viewing first 6 bars 4+2?
Oh, I do 6 at the beginning.
6.
You mean two? Yeah, because I think the tie over the second to the third bar, I don't think I could do 2 + 4. And
No,
4
I
+ 2.
thought it could be 4+2.
Yeah. Da, 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 da. I feel weird about finishing after the 4. Da 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 dee, da da da. Da, 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 da. It doesn't, for me, I can't say. Whereas da 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 dum, ba 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 da 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 dum can work, I think. In one set, I mean, it's a 6 anyway, but.
Also, just looking again at I think I'm referencing something Leo looked at, you know, the rhythmic organization of the score, and how obviously it's in 3/4, you know, quite just generally this idea of the in a triplet meter, and composition wise, it makes it really focus on that, you know, groupings of 3 all throughout the movement. Now I might be reading into this too much, but for most of Haydn's quartets, at the end of his score, he always puts like a praise be to God, you know. At the end of this one, it says Gloria in excelsis Deo, you know, just a little message saying thanks be to God. And he was a really religious man, very devoutly Catholic. And I don't know, could he be thinking of, you know, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost in this? Maybe not. I don't know. It's a, you know, who knows what the symbolic, what is really going on in Haydn's head. But this kind of separating that, but also the unity in this trio feeling might be an interesting thing to think about.
You want to listen to a little bit of the example for the exposition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about this mosaic?
Yeah.
Quatuor mosaic. Should I share screen or?
Yeah.
All right. Maybe.
I'll stop share mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Quatuor mosaic.
Whilst Carmen's setting that up, I think there's a lot of conversation in the chat about this 2 to 3 beat battu après, you know, how you think of the connections. One thing I think that is really important for me in thinking of this opening is that it's allegro di molto, and that feeling can only become if you really feel 3 crotchets. And for me, that's the thing, is the second you go into 1, you start feeling like it's a slow movement, or I feel like it's a slow movement. Bum, 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 like I feel slow. Whereas 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, I feel like it's allegro di molto. And for me, that's where that feeling comes from. And if you're thinking ahead for your triplets, how you feel the dum bum bum ba da, like you keep that dum bum 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 bum, then I feel like I'm in an allegro in a first movement. And that for me is really important, a really important distinction. And it's really in one's head. And it changes the way you find the sound. Go ahead, Carmen. Is it working or?
Oh, yes.
Yes, sorry. I was just, there we go.
That's not the beginning.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, did you want to hear it again? Sorry.
That was from bar 13.
Oh, okay. Yes. I'll play from the beginning again. It must have not come through. How's that?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You definitely hear 2 + 4, don't you, in their interpretation there? Da, 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 ba, 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 ba.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you call that allegro di molto?
Good question. Not quite, in my
Much
view.
more like a gentle walking pace.
Yes. Definitely, it's a very difficult
Well, I
marking.
don't really agree with that actually. I think it's I thought that, I mean, if you think it it always applies to the beats, right? If it says allegro di molto, it doesn't mean 1 in a bar allegro di molto. It means 3 in a bar allegro. So and that just means fast. So how fast is, you know, you think andante perhaps is sort of 1 2 3 1, perhaps something like that. So 1 2 3 1 2 3 is already pretty allegro. I do think it could be a bit faster, but I think that's pretty faithful. I mean, 1 2 3 1 2 3. You know, it's got a sense of urgency about it.
I think that was 185, my trusty metronome, per crotchet, which actually, when you think of a crotchet speed, that's fast.
Yeah, that's fast.
Would you like to hear another?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the Attacca Quartet.
The attackers one, it's if you can do the beginning.
Yeah.
And then kind of skip to the well, just a little bit of beginning and then skip to the recap. What I found interesting is after you play the exposition and then, you know, all these elements of triplet, when they return, they have a little bit more natural momentum, and in the exposition seems very static. So I thought that's really interesting. Natural, that's what happened on the performance, or that's what intended on it, just slightly different.
I see. Okay, so
if you can play just a little bit of both.
Okay, sure. Here's the Attacca Quartet. All right, so I'll move to the recap. Let's see here. Great.
You know what I mean? It might be the body language thing.
That's not the recap. That was the
Oh,
recap.
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean recap. I mean the repeat.
Repeat.
Oh,
I was like,
okay.
I mean the repeat. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's something, you know, how that has actually even developed in performance. How
Yeah.
the playing of that theme changes.
shall we
Fascinating.
talk about the triplet passages now?
Yeah.
And just how we.
Okay. I'll share the screen.
The triplet passages seem to me quite obviously just multiplying it by 3, right? The original idea.
And also a more declamatory statement in a way, because, you know, we've gone from this opening, exploratory opening, not sure, is it a question, is there an answer? And I think the mood, the character really change suddenly with the first violin. I can't sing, but yeah, you know, really sharp kind of character.
In some ways, I always think of the bottom 3 as the ones who are driving that change, because even though I have the range and the flourish, there's something bump about the wedges and the forte in the bottom parts that really make this change and the strength of it. It's often a question when you listen to recordings and you think about how free and how specific, like rhythmic you have to be, the da 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 da, or is it a flourish? And what does that? How does that mean? Does the bottom go yum bum bum bum, or is it 4 equal dum bum bum bum, or do you go to the next bar bum 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 bum? There's so many different ways to try, and to feel the sort of the movement, and then you go back to the piano again, and then you try it again, and then interestingly, it takes quite a long time to come back to that feeling. Doesn't it? If you go further down, because the next law of triplets is actually more searching. I don't find it it's not as strong. So actually his conversation and his sort of trying to break away from the opening is much is more of a stronger feeling than actually when we get to da 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 da. That's not in the same mood at all.
No,
and
no.
I think it takes quite a long time to get back to that mood. I feel like when we get to the development, we get somewhere there in the development, but it takes a very long time.
It's harmonically very shocking at bar 31, and then everybody dug it, and then that's pretty much like breaks up all this gentleness or like a long 6 bars oriented but slightly zen like mood, and then you know, it has that. But what's striking, sorry, am I echoing?
You are a bit, yeah.
I am, isn't it? I don't know what to do with that.
Oh yeah, it's always when Katie's unmuted, you echo. It's weird. I don't know why.
Let's blame Katie. And then answer, that's pretty much question and answer. Well, that's pair, right? Response. The one I really like this bar, about 41. You know, that kind of power of lower 3 to break up, you know, bum bum, and then this triplet becomes the conversation between first violin and cello. Yeah. So that kind of change of conversation as we play, as music goes, is you know, what one of the great things about Haydn quartet, isn't it? And then it's just kind of like how this playfulness to like kind of we move on to the next mood. So when cello and the first violin dialogue, and then when first violin climb up the last triplet from 54, and then we're gonna go into this like really beautiful singing area.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning that this beautiful singing area is a direct result of this tension of what I put there, the dominant pedal with the 7th. The tension builds and builds. It's obviously the 7th is the is the D natural clashing air with the E. And it just sort of gets more and more insistent until it sort of bursts outwards in bar 55. I think this is probably just, it's if you look back to the interrupted cadence in bar 23 or 24, that's sort of 1, 2, 3, 4. It's supposed to be. It's very, very much interrupted. By which I mean it. It should be. It's the fourth phrase. It should close off the introduction nicely, but it doesn't. It's interrupted. So it's sort of. I suppose it's a hint of where we're going in bar 31. But he does this sort of weird attempt to round off the introduction anyway, back into D major. Before that, which is very strange. I don't really know what to make of it. But it also, interestingly, if you look at bar 22, 3, 4, bar 25, bar 26, actually, I've circled the interesting new bits that are in. So he's now hinting in bits that are going to come later. So I suppose he's trying to get in all the material that will be in the piece into this introduction somehow. But the whole goal of this, eventually, of this B minor, is to get to A major, the dominant. That's the whole purpose of it. He's obsessed with trying to get there by the double bar, and he actually gets there very early. And we're in A major from bar 43.
Oh, I see.
Until the double bar, pretty much.
So do you see the this unison passing bum 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 bum? That's kind of confirmation of A, or like gathering up of A?
I think it's probably all. I mean, there's so much confirmation of it. I think it's probably just. I mean, you should probably think of it as him just glorifying in it, really, in the key, in the dominant. The dominant, don't forget, is always more interesting than the tonic. Just like if you add a note if you have one note on its own, it's boring. But if you add a note to it, that is the more interesting note immediately.
What I love too is, as you said, relishing in this A. Like Haydn's ability to go from playfulness, this playful conversation between the cello and violin 1 that's happening with the triplets. But then in bar 55, 56, 57, suddenly it's like, as Tamaki said, the tension builds, and then suddenly we're in this really ethereal place, singing. Everybody is really playing legato notes, holding notes, like the choir is opening up to a really sublime kind of experience. So that his ability to go change moods like that is really masterful as a composer. So I appreciate how you were saying in the early quartets, he was just kind of reforming dances, like the style of dances. But now he's pushing into territory that is really tapping into emotional content somehow. And so pushing the boundaries of composition that way within the quartet, using the quartet as an expressive storyteller in some way, rather than just like a dance band, perhaps.
I mean, as we explored in Beethoven, from Opus 18, and then it's very classical, but like how he kind of break up the boundary and then, created his own story. So I'm very aware of that, that innovation, but how much freedom it's actually, when Haydn established this very secure string quartet form, 4 movements, things, and a sonata form, but like within that, how much freedom it's written and how inspiring that is, like, mood changing sex, just so eloquently by how he composed. And then it really struck me, and it was kind of really fresh feeling. It was a really fresh feeling for me.
So just to look at that bar 74, there's just a little question about that chord, the diminished 7th chord that we play with the sforzando. Now, obviously, not having it on the downbeat makes it more exciting. Putting a sforzando on that second beat, and how is it an emotional sound or is it a accented sound? I think you can all, obviously what we really want to hear is the harmony of that chord. We want to hear the diminished seventh, which we haven't had. So we've had this glorious A major, and then suddenly he plays the seventh of A major, which is the G natural, but instead of making an A7, da 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 da, he plays da 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 da, which could be in any da 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 da. There's something sort of painful and beautiful about that, I think. And then we only get da 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 da. He comes back to it. If you look at the bottom of this page at 82 and 83, that's where he comes back and finally plays our A7 as we were expecting.
And
and I think
unison triplet. It's the first time, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're linking this. I mean, the triplets are just embellishments, aren't they? And that's where I think it's fun to think of the nature of them and whether the slurring can help us make it sound more playful, more interesting, more repetitive. And how we do that, I think, is a really interesting thing. I did look up in, we had a little talk in our sectional in 82 about the slurring of that bar. And in the, I think I put a picture of those numbers and what they mean, the little 3 that's there. And actually there's a suggestion of slurring da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, which could be a possibility. So that you could easily use the bowing there. To accentuate that triad if you wanted to. Now, I'm aware of time a little bit. Are there any other moments in this? Just the talking back so much A major. Just look at the coda a little bit maybe, and then we should move on to the second movement.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a lot of A major.
You mean
So
the exposition?
Yeah, the codetta, yeah.
I was just going to say, there's just that following from Katie's point is that it's there is a surprising amount of pain in the piece, isn't there? It seems like a very happy piece, but there's a bit of darkness there that you can see right there in bar 90. That's a very different place to what we sort of the idea that we have of this movement, but it's very significant.
I always question this this motif introduced in the 80 1 2 3 4. I have a question like where did this come from? I mean, it's a really beautiful interval, but like thinking about everything was sort of flat to start with. Bum, 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 unison. So everything was like that, and then finally we play this triplets, perhaps some sort of second theme together, and then like the motif becomes so kind of interval leap oriented, and then there's something that interval itself speaks to me, and then something emotional that within the interval. But I agree, like 90.
Yeah, it's often something to suggest doing when you do finally play with your colleagues, to actually play a lot of these passages quite slowly, because we often don't hear the harmony as clearly. You think you know what's happening, but when you play it really slowly, you feel the clashes even more. There's something even more painful about it when you feel the clash of your notes against each other, and in a way that we're not expecting. Yeah, I think we should move on to the second movement. Yeah. Shall we play a little bit? Could you play a little bit of a one of the recording samples at the beginning of the second movement, just to get us in the...
Yes, for sure. Oh, sorry. Let me find.
So one of these samples I chose because the cellist was doing loads of vibrato on these percussive low notes, and I thought it was quite funny. So I wanted to.
Is it the McCord quartet?
Yeah, to show how not to do it. Even it sounds they sound good. They sound really nice, but it's how what always happens to me is that the cello sticks out to me whenever I hear a quartet. It always sticks out like a sore thumb. But anyway, see if you have the same reaction. Let's hear a bit of it.
Here we go.
Oh no, that's the recap.
This is the
in the
recap.
first movement.
Do you
Yeah.
want the second movement?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Pardon me.
Sorry, I don't know if I put the seconds on it. Did I?
Let me go. Let me sort that out for you.
Yeah, let Carmen King.
Oh, it's 8 minutes in. 8 minutes 6 seconds.
8 minutes 6. Okay.
Yeah.
So like just when we move on to the second movement, you know, obviously theme and variation, and then how significant it is at that time for everybody to have the voice again, like equality of voices in string quartet, and then how significant that was in the that moment.
Here it is. Oh. I'm pulling out. I'm accidentally pulling up the other quartet. My apologies. How is that? Is that enough?
Makes Imogen want to scream.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's very flat. It's not equal. I don't feel the different. So for me, it's so important when you're creating the texture that you have a different role. So did you think, I felt that time that 2, 3, like second violin, viola, cello, the 2, 3, 4 voices were all the same sound. Yeah. So you didn't hear a distinction. You don't hear bass, middle, second violin with a response. So the response is as important, that you have that conversation going, even though it's a sort of, you know, it's a response. It's not the first time you say the rhythm, bomb, 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 but you need the second violin to be as interested as
exactly. I'm glad you reacted that way, because I picked that recording because it's a perfect example of how not to play quartet, really, but still playing well. You know, they are playing undeniably well. They just don't seem to understand their roles. I mean, the most obvious part to me was the way the cello ended it, with a bunch of vibrato on this, you know, F, C, F. And it just completely ridiculous, because it just makes a percussive line melodic. So it's just basically getting your roll wrong.
But in general, this for this movement, style and the sound and the vibrato, that's a big topic, isn't it?
Yeah. How much? You know, this is.
What do you? How do you view, or what's your thought for this?
I think, well, it's the first violin is the melody, so the first violin should be thinking about vibrato, really. Everyone else should really be thinking about their bow and what role they're playing, what kind of sound they should be making with the bow. As soon as you play vibrato, it's like adding ketchup to something. It's really noticeable, you know, and it can ruin it. It can immediately ruin it, depending on what you're having, you know. So I would say, you know, either the bottom three voices agree on a level of vibrato that is in the background, or we do none at all and focus just on our bow sound, on supporting the melody, and playing off it as well. It's quite rhythmic. The other three parts are, as I was saying, quite percussive. So that's more important, I think.
Not just percussive, but actually rhythmic in the sense that it doesn't start. Nobody else starts on the first beat. Yeah. The first bar. So and if you look at that, the same thing every time, and that rhythmic element, dum, bum, ba-dum, coming in on that second quaver really does change the rhythm of it. And if you come in as if you were playing the first beat, you have a different energy and a different rhythmic importance for that second quaver of the bar. And I think that's the bit. So starting with no vibrato, possibly. I mean, you can try all versions, but I think it's important to have, everybody instinctively does some on different notes. Even if I do find in quartets, and I don't know if you all feel the same when you play with your colleagues, but you can make a rule, like you make a sort of, let's do no vibrato, or let's just do poco vibrato. And then you look around and instinctively everybody has to feel certain notes need a little bit more. And I think that makes personality. And by having a blanket rule, sometimes it's boring. So thinking starting point is the bow, starting point are the slurs, starting point is rhythm, because or else you don't have this rhythm thing. I mean, looking at the tempo direction, un poco adagio. So, where do we come? Not andante, but not, you have to think ahead and how much freedom you might want for each of the variations and what the variations, where's the variety coming in those variations.
Yeah. That's a good.
Sorry. No,
Oh,
go
no.
on.
Okay, I was saying that's a good point. I was going to suggest listening to another example where the quartet has deliberately decided to change tempo amongst variations. And, again, it's like, what license do we have for that? It's a nice musical choice. So I'll play, the next one is Doric Quartet. And I'll just play the end of the opening theme as they go into variation 1. So here we go. It's the end of the theme. There you go. I thought that was an interesting, change, just to give a different character to the tempo. Because if you did play variation 1 in the same tempo, that's a completely different character, isn't it? What do you guys think of this?
I liked that. I thought that was quite a good idea. And it wasn't actually very far from the tempo. It wasn't a huge tempo change, but they really got the different feeling very well, I think.
So it's really interesting. You can either think of it as a complete change, like, okay, that's the theme, and now these are all completely different viewpoints, or you can say, okay, how do we ornament the theme? And are variations like an ornamentation on the same idea, or a completely new sort of variety? And I think you can play, I mean, there are a million different ways. It was so light. I love that. And John, the cellist, it's interesting. I like his short notes. I think they're very, they're very sort of round, bassoon-like. You have this really sort of round but full sound on each of them, so you really can hear the harmony. But they're not heavy, and that I think is the
there's a way that you can play. Because it is percussive, but it's also very harmonic. It's an amazing balance between harmony and articulation, really. And that was a really good example of a good balance of it, I think. Because you can't be too percussive, and you can't be too harmonic. You have to find the right balance, and I thought that was good.
And one beautiful example, I mean, their ornamentation was great, wasn't it? I mean,
very
this is
nice.
where we have to start being creative. So every time you repeat, what can you do to make a beautiful ornamentation? Obviously, think of your chord notes as the downbeats, and can you add something before? The C natural that he added da, 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 was great. I hadn't heard that one before, and I really liked it. And trills are often a really good way of doing it. If you have a leap of a fourth, you could fill in the notes in between dum, ba, da, dum. You can fill in the notes in between. And every time you do something like that, you are enhancing and making more beautiful something that's there already. And that's why I think we want to ornament a bit, I think, on the repeat to make it, enhance your idea and your speed and your mood.
Absolutely.
It's also a chance to put some of your personality into it as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, if you we'll put all these recording links on a document for you to access and listen to later. But again, if you listen to this recording, for instance, in the cello variation, when he plays it once and then the second time around, it's that has the most ornaments of all the instruments in this recording, which I find really interesting. So yeah, it's nice to we have another listening sample, the Haydn Quartet. Would you like to listen to this? Okay, let me find this.
Was that on YouTube? I couldn't find them on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. I love Haydn, especially this kind of era's work and early Mozart too. Well, the way I see how they do it is whether they do left-hand vibrato or not, but they're very aware of the vibration coming from so whether you identify it is left-hand vibrato or not, but they're kind of always aware of the in general vibration and kind of maximizing, extending it. So I think it's very successful sound.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the vibrato, Tamaki, because actually for me, it definitely is like slightly more than I would go for, especially up top. It was very soprano warbly for me. But they really go for that glorious, like it's the one moment in the piece, isn't it, that is like that you get up and you're just sort of falling down. And the imagery for me is there, but I do find the sound maybe possibly too, as I say, soprano heavy. But the color of harmony that they find and the way that they bring that out is interesting. It might be my speakers, but I actually found the balance. Normally, I find the Haydn's balance perfect. I found the viola not as present in that. In the beginning part of it, I didn't hear it as clearly, and it just shows what you really do want to hear all four, don't you? Because if you're missing somebody, and for me, a lot of that is where you are in relation to your bridge at all times. So are you, if the bottom three have to find that balance of next to the bridge further away to make the sound speak but not to be sort of lost, I find.
Oh, Tamaki.
Yeah, we have lots of interesting comments today, and then just open up so many things. And then perhaps we should transfer all this into the classroom so that we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, it's great to think about. I mean, everybody's comments are so interesting, and to look at that whilst we're sort of talking and thinking about all of how we put the piece together. I think you need to think about all of these things and actually try them all out, because I don't think somehow I feel you have to try them and then see what 4 people in a room feel on that day feels like the right way forward, and that changes all the time. And with Haydn, I often find that I will rehearse a certain way and feel very strongly about it, and then in the concert, when there were concerts, I would perform and play completely the opposite. But somehow by exploring it together, you start to find your language and your way. And actually, it's not to say that other ways aren't valid and interesting, but I think it's really great. If we look at the end of this, the coda of the second movement, because I find ensemble as the most challenging. When you think of the other variations, somehow you're really looking at how the different voices are exploring the variety and the variations. But when we get to the end, from where we were listening to, so we do the sotto voce version, and then we come to this new music, which is not a variation, and how the coda, I would imagine, starts here, but you could also wonder whether from that glorious da, da, dee, da, 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 there's something going on there that you don't know where you are. How you play all these, you hear the harmony and yet play with the articulation. This is so much articulation, don't you think? In contrast, we have so much smooth. So at the top of the page, just of the previous stanzas, you can see that everything is just so smooth. And then if you look down to 111, we just said da, da. Oh yes, sforzandos, pianos, daggers, clarity. And how do you balance that? I don't know in the quartet what your feelings were of this moment.
Yeah, I like Leo's note, because I remember in rehearsal we tried breaking it down a little bit back into the harmony without worrying about the articulate. There's a lot of layers, when there's a lot of information coming at you at once, it's just like, what do I focus on? Do I focus on the articulation? Do I focus on the dynamic, the way my bow is going with my colleagues? Or so I remember we condensed it into harmony and then started adding more things on top of it, which helped us to organize, just kind of focusing on what is the technical task at hand in a way, but then emotionally, what are we trying to say with this passage? And it helped our ensemble a lot, didn't it? It helped us because we were all on the same page in terms of organizing our thoughts. We could then move forward with one mindset into playing it very accurately together, showing that together.
I can't believe I didn't write Neapolitan under 116. Sorry. It was like the most interesting harmony thing I could have written in, and I didn't put it in. So 116 is the Neapolitan cadence. That's quite fun if you want to know what that is. That's the flattened supertonic in first inversion, if you want to know the nerdy.
I like all the nerdy things. My knowledge of harmony is not advanced enough to know these things.
you only need to know
what it feels like.
If you know Neapolitan and supertonic things like that, then you don't need to know anything else. It makes you seem much cleverer than you are.
So going back to our quavers here. So I think bow distribution, incredibly important. We all have to everybody has to have the same bow distribution, or it will not sound the same. Now you could say possibly as you go higher up, you could use slightly more bow than the cello, but actually in this sort of place, I think if everybody plays with the same, I think you can really get a core color with 4 people playing exactly the same. You really have to lift after the slur. If you don't lift, you don't get that articulation at the end of the slur. So the beginning of the slur needs a bit of articulation and accent in order. Now, how much weight versus speed, I think, is the thing that you need to play around with. So weight versus speed. Then you come off at the end of the quaver, and then 2 short notes. So, and how you, the variety and the possibilities are huge, but you do have to think about all those things. Where you are we, do we start kind of quite low down the bow? I felt that I was more in control a little bit at the end of the bow. I think it's true that the forzando feeling here is definitely the feeling of offbeat. So bottom, and it doesn't have 2 emphases. So the release is the coming off the string. But I think all of those things you actually need to practice them yourself, and then you need to figure out what feels comfortable, and then you have to find a way that feels comfortable for 4 people for this passage, and then you get a sort of unanimous sort of progression of harmony. And it's so I love that it comes after so much individualism. You know, the whole rest of this movement is all about an individual voice with comments, and suddenly we are finishing the movement together. You know, you get that little cadence. I always think the little 4 before the end, the little trill, is like the end of a cadenza. And then the 5, boom, boom, and then it's a very simple, and actually pianissimo is a very strange marking. Well, it's very quiet, but it's very subdued for the end. You know, he's very specific about that.
Yeah, so James just said, does forzando apply to 2 notes? That's a very good question. We don't know, basically. My guess would be no, but the second note would, of course, be influenced by however you play the forzando. The one thing I really want to ask Simon Rowland Jones when he comes and does his lecture is, what's the difference between a sforzando and a forzando? These seem to be forzandos. I don't know what, I suspect they're probably the same thing, but that's something I want to ask him. Just the last point I wanted to make about this movement is that a really good idea is to, while there are endless options and everything, it's good to just look at each variation and decide a basic character before you start trying to put it together. I wouldn't go in thinking, oh, it could be absolutely anything, let's just see what happens. It's like, no, the first movement is the first bit is obviously the first violin tune. There's not really another way of looking at it. The first variation is the rhythmic variation. The second variation is the cello melody, and so on. So like there is a definite character and an obvious sort of feature of each variation, and that should really, I suppose, influence mostly how you play it. I think.
And then that would open up the general conversation and a question of a virtuoso. So how we fit all this individual journey in the basic color of the world of a virtuoso. Yeah, very fascinating music, isn't it?
And there's just so many options, and that's what I think is so brilliant about Haydn, is that it gives you there's so many potential, and you really change and grow with it, depending on what you've seen in the score, how you feel that works. I do really like to practice off the score a lot of the time, either having the score on my music and playing off my part, just so that I think in a past life I actually used to minimize the scores and play off them completely, because if you could get whole movements on a sort of a big A3, and you could then see everything that was going on all the time, and often write like a score like Leo, sort of write a lot of the harmony in, write a lot of the phrase markings in. I think it does inform your performance, and every time you play it, you have a different feeling about that. Now, does anyone? I think we should open up to. We have one more. I just wanted to play the end. One more little example. Carmen, do you mind?
Yeah.
So you're doing that today. It's literally from where we stopped.
Oh,
From
yeah.
the D, do, 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 do.
Is it which quartet is it?
It was the last example.
Takash quartet?
The Takash.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite an old recording, but it's just that end bit that we were just talking about.
Okay.
So they definitely thought that the sforzandos applied to both notes, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting to hear. I thought it sounded quite good, actually.
The reaction of it, yeah, and a very violent third to end bar. Did you think to last bar?
Yeah.
It was very strong.
A very rude interruption.
Yeah, it was interesting. But you start to look at their bow distribution and you think, oh, interesting. How are they doing it? Very much like I think of that passage as a much lower part of my bow, and they were definitely like thinking of it much longer and more of a tip action. So you do get a completely different sound from that. Shall we open the floor and see anybody had any thoughts or questions or queries, things to ask or things to share about the piece they've discovered? Maybe either hands or we can wave at us. We can give the floor to anyone. No thoughts.
I think it's a case of there's too much to think about, isn't it?
Definitely.
I mean, it felt like we could have gone on 2 hours just on the first movement, didn't it? But then you suddenly have to skip forward loads. I mean, it's a shame, but.
Well, as always, throughout this course, if something pops up for you, always, share it in the classroom stream or the WhatsApp chat. I mean, this is always an ongoing conversation for us, and we just hope to give you these, thoughts to start off with as we launch Haydn.
By the way, I only just joined the WhatsApp group late, sort of yesterday or something. So, and I don't have anything that has been in there before. But apparently, somebody asked if the cello section, or if we could start with the last movement, and I think it's a good idea. So we'll do that on Friday. We'll start with the last movement, just to give you more time to prepare for it. Just to let you know, I got that message, and we will do that.
Good move. Great. So for the rest of this week, apart from the cellos who are going to do some, they're going to do some fourth movement. I think I'm going to do 1 and 2 in tomorrow. So we started already, just a little hints of how we might approach these movements. But I'm really looking forward to working through them. I quite like the chronologicals. Start from the beginning, go through the whole movement, think about various things. How does it apply in different parts? But and then so violin 1, then violin 2, viola, and then cello on Friday. And we look forward to seeing you all then. So if anybody doesn't have any more questions, we will say that's great for today, and we'll put all these thoughts and comments on our classroom. I just noticed that somebody messaged that the first 4 notes of movement 3 are the same as movement 2. That's great. I love things like that. And we'll see you all tomorrow and the rest of the week. Lovely Monday morning, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
See you tomorrow onwards.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.